Hello, this is Everybody Settle Down. I'm Charlie Marlow. That is the great Eric Messersmith. We are here to break down the two monstrous stories in politics. Of course, the RNC finishing up and Donald Trump's very long speech, Eric Messersmith, and also the fact that it sure looks like Joe Biden will be stepping out of the race. So we'll start with the RNC. I'll throw it to you. And we did a podcast on Wednesday, breaking down the first couple days. So if you want to just kind of give me your thoughts on the last couple days, and also, of course, Donald Trump's 92-minute speech.
The convention overall, I think, was a big success for Republicans. I think it was for several reasons. First of all, as you and I have talked about before, this was really the unity convention for Donald Trump that he did not have, certainly in 2016, when he was kind of like an alien trying to take over the party still. And then even in 2020, obviously he was the president then, but it was COVID and they had the virtual convention. So this was kind of the coronation of the Republican Party becoming the MAGA party. And you saw that everywhere, and you saw the enthusiasm. You saw DeSantis and Haley come to bend the knee. I mean, it was Trump through and through. It was unity. The second thing was you have to give credit for how well produced it was. Like, say what you will about Trump, love him or hate him. This is the most professional operation he has ever had in his campaign. The two co-chairs of his campaign, they are really good. They're two professionals. Susie Wiles, I believe, is the name of the woman who's one of the co-chairs. She's from Florida. She's actually Pat Summerall's daughter, the
Mm.
legendary NFL play-by-play man. And this whole campaign for Trump has been really about as professional as you can make a Trump campaign, right? And I think, again, put aside how you feel about the policies that were talked about or some of the things said, just in terms of pure execution from a entertainment slash political advocacy perspective, I think they executed really well with the range of speakers like Dana
Mhm.
White and Hulk Hogan, Amber Rose, and then the everyday Americans, the mom who lost her son to fentanyl, the Afghanistan, the people, the family members and parents of the people killed in Afghanistan. That was incredibly affecting when that happened on Wednesday. So overall, I think the convention was really well produced, and also they think they're going to win. They're even beyond they're convinced they're going to win. And part of that is because obviously the Democrats are in disarray and the polls look good for Trump. And he is the betting favorite to win. And so they feel like victory is at hand. And you can see it, the confidence, not just with Trump, but with the whole hall. Like they feel like they are on the verge of a complete victory. So you put all that together, and I think it came off really well. Now, I think the one caveat to that is the last hour of Trump's speech. The first half hour, because again, it was the longest speech ever at 90, longest acceptance speech ever at 92 minutes. Up until the first half hour of Trump's speech, up through that point, I think they had executed about as well as you possibly could have imagined. If he would have stopped at the 30-minute mark and like just said, "Hey, I want your vote," like I think it would have been a home run because he was subdued. His demeanor was completely different in that first half hour. He was calling for unity. The way he broke down his experience of the shooting, really the first time we've heard from him in detail about it, I thought was extremely compelling. The having the firefighter's uniform who was tragically killed behind, on the stage, and then he walked over to it and talked about the money they raised for that family. All of that stuff like was super compelling. He said, I had God on my side. I'm not supposed to be here. All of that I thought was very effective. And then it turned. And that last hour was it was way too long. It was meandering. It was really devoid of almost any specific policies. It was essentially a souped up version of his stump speech. And I'm thinking, you guys had a long time to get ready for this. And the first half hour again, very good, which I'm sure they obviously wrote on the fly because the events he was talking about literally happened 5 days ago. So the part they wrote on the fly was great. The part that I'm sure they've been preparing for months or weeks at least, not so good. And I think the thing that happened in that last hour. I'm just thinking if you're a Democrat watching that, you have had perhaps the worst 3 weeks that we have ever seen a modern presidential campaign have,
Mhm.
starting from the debate, all that's happened since, to the point now where it looks like maybe, probably, we're on the verge of a completely new nominee 3 weeks before the convention. You're down in the polls, even in a state like Virginia. Like you're about as dispirited as you can be. The Republicans are executing this convention. They have all this energy and excitement. Trump's is now a sympathetic figure, probably for the first time in his political career. Like you are as low as you can possibly be as a Democrat. And then there was the last hour of that speech. And I think if you're a Democrat watching that, I think A, this guy just doesn't have a lot on policy. B, it's a lot of the same stuff we heard before. And most importantly, C, we can beat this guy. Like, despite everything, the vulnerability is there. And I think if you're a Democrat watching that, it should give you at least a confidence that even though Trump is favored, this race is not over. And it looked like after what Biden did at the debate, after the Trump near assassination, after it looked like earlier in the week Biden may hang on, and then the well executed convention. I mean, we were looking at it still may be there, but we were looking at a potential landslide for Republicans, right? I think the second half of that speech, again, I'm not saying it changes everything. I think it just gives you an opening if you're the Democrats to say, you know what, we can reset this race because the Trump we saw in the second half of that, the second 2/3 of that speech is someone who can be beat.
Sure. And we'll get to the Biden switcheroo later. I think that's much more important in terms of resetting if Democrats can win. And I agree with you. Basically, if Biden stayed in, I thought Biden had virtually no chance of winning. And whatever percentage you actually want to put on it, 5, 10, 15, 20%, like he was going to lose. If I'm a Democrat, I'm much more energized by the fact that it looks like they're going to switch out Joe Biden. And if you follow the Mark Halperin report, that it's not just going to go right to Kamala, that it's going to be essentially an open convention. And if it's Kamala and apparently about three other people, if you believe the report from Mark Halperin, who's a very credible political reporter. So let's just say it's Newsom, it's Whitmer, Shapiro, and then they could actually go out there and kind of make their case for the next 4.5 weeks or so. But we'll get to that even more. Yeah, so I think the last hour of that speech was kind of the Trump that you're used to. And I think the RNC did a great job of look, they unified themselves. And I do think
Absolutely.
the first 2 days did feel very unifying as a country, like reaching out, different speakers representing different voters, not your traditional, oh, like your white male conservatives, right? I mean, really opening it up to a lot of different people. Now, this might be my own personal bias, and before I say this, I just want people to know I noticed this on CNN back in 2016. Obviously CNN, everybody lost their mind when Trump won. But then if you started to watch CNN during the Trump administration, and this is honestly, Eric, when I stopped watching cable news, CNN was painting this picture that the world was just so terrible. And I
Right.
mean, we're on the verge of Armageddon just because Donald Trump was in office. And I'm living my life and I'm saying I'm not seeing what you're seeing. And this is what right-wing news does now. Now, don't get me wrong. I understand our country has a lot of problems. But as a 42-year-old man who has lived through, I mean, we had Columbine and 9/11 and then Iraq and then Afghanistan and the 2008 financial crisis and then COVID. And so when I consume a lot of political news, especially from the right, when I get hammered in my head daily how awful everything is, right? Everything is awful. It's the worst economy ever. The worst. And by the way, the border is terrible. That's the one I truly agree with people on the right that the Biden administration did terrible on the border. But crime has never been worse. The economy's never been worse. And it's like, okay, crime has gone down. We have our issues. And look, inflation is bad. The stock market is sky high. Unemployment is very low. I mean, we know interest rates are bad right now. So again, I'm trying to be fair, but for somebody who tries to remain positive, it's hard for me to consume this year the Republican and Trump's campaign because and I get it. I get it. They have to say that everything has never been worse because you have
Right.
to change. I get it. But for me, as a positive person that always tries to look at this glass, Eric, half full, see it? Watch right
I
there.
see it. I see it.
That's one third full. It's not two thirds empty. I
Empty.
don't know. I just when I hear time after time how terrible everything is, and Trump brought up the killing fields of Washington D.C.
Oh,
like it was Vietnam. I don't know, and I'm not a Trump guy, so everybody that hears, and I'm not a Biden guy either. But I don't know. I just that last hour of the Trump speech was like, this is same old Trump to me.
see, yeah, there's really two major vulnerabilities for Trump, and the first is what it was so evident in that last hour. And the first is what you're saying. Much of the stuff he's saying just objectively is not true, right? I mean, you talk about the crime. We the FBI statistics, preliminary, but their statistic for 2023, the biggest year over year drop in murders we have seen and recorded since they started keeping numbers. In fact, violent crime and murders are down now below where they were in 2020 when who was president then? Donald Trump. Oil. He talks about drill baby drill, which yeah, okay, well we produce more oil now than any nation, including America, has ever produced in history. Everything from the China trade deficit, which is lower now than it was under Donald Trump. Adding to the debt. Yeah, Biden's added a lot to the debt. Trump's added twice what Biden did to the debt. 8 trillion versus 4 trillion. You can go down the list point after point. Again, that's not to say everything is perfect. We all know, and you and I have discussed, and everybody's talked about the struggles of the Biden administration, of where we are in America right now. But his overselling it is so extreme and so ridden with inaccuracies, like to put it kindly, that it is so easy if you have a strong candidate on the other side to come back and say, "What are you talking about? Those numbers aren't true. Let me run it down for you." And just like I did, in 30 seconds, but a much more expansive version. You could go issue by issue by issue, and for them and poke a lot of holes in that. The other thing too is for someone who says there's so much wrong with the country, where are the solutions? We hear I'm going to fix everything. I'm going to lower prices. We don't hear how. We hear the few things I did hear that were specific proposals. No tax, no tax on tips, which okay, fine, that will affect some people on the margins. We can debate the merits of that. There are arguments that I've seen on both sides of that. um, Closing the border, building the wall, mass deportations, but not really talking about exactly how or exactly how many people would be deported. Or are we going to deport all 20 million people here, illegally in this country, which would be a massive undertaking, and then have deportation camps all over the country, and a tariff. But that was kind of mentioned as well, which again is a terrible idea on the merits, across the board tariff. That's pretty much it. And look, he's banking on mainly Biden's age and perceived weakness, but he's also banking on the fact that prices are roughly 20% than they were 3 years ago, not 50% with food, as he said last night. Again, another inaccuracy. And he's banking on the fact that people are mad as hell about the lawlessness of the border for the Biden administration up until like a month ago, when the numbers now have dropped dramatically because they finally decided to do something, right? Which is where we are now. So he's banking on that, and it's working. And it probably will work if Biden remains the candidate. But if he doesn't, and you get someone in there who isn't 81 and is able to articulately push back on these things, look, again, am I saying that person is the favorite? No, we're pretty deep in the campaign, but I'm saying it's a whole new ball game. It's game on, and it's a race that a Democrat could win.
Yeah, I just wonder, and I don't mean to belabor this point, but I just wonder from a strategy standpoint if that makes sense. And I'm at the point now, by the way, I think they're going to 100% switch out Joe Biden. So I'm assuming, by the way, that Trump is not going up against Biden, which with his 92-minute speech, I think the only, and I've heard some people say, oh, well, he showed his stamina. He can be up there for 92 minutes. Biden can't, which I 100% agree with, by the way. There's no way Joe Biden could stand up there for 92 minutes. But also, it wasn't a good speech. And if your idea is, hey, I'm going to show my stamina against Biden, we all know Joe Biden is deteriorating. But I don't think you're going up against Joe Biden. I think you're going to go up against a 55 to 60-year-old person in whoever the hell it is, Kamala, Newsom, Whitmer, Shapiro, whatever it is. But what I'm trying to say is, I'm just trying to think, Eric, of who is going to swing this election. And everybody who's in Team MAGA, they're already there. And if you're a Republican, you're there. And there's going to be a lot of people, whatever that 35% on the left, they're never going to vote for Trump. So whatever the middle portion is, 5, 10, 15, 20%, I don't know what that is. If it's suburban moms, if it's the never Trump Republicans who might come back on board, if it's the Democrats that really don't like Biden, if it's RFK supporters, I don't know. I just wonder if the strategy of always saying how terrible everything is works for the people that are going to swing this election. I would think that answer is no, personally. What do you think?
It's really hard when you're doing it with information that isn't accurate, A, and B, when you don't again, it's striking to me. I've been around, I've heard a lot of acceptance speeches, going back, what, 30, 40, 30 years now, so for the time I can remember. And it's just, and I don't really count 2020 because of the virtual conventions. I didn't even watch, I don't think, most of those. So I don't that year is just like black hole to me. But other than that, I don't remember any acceptance speech that had so little in the way of actual policy. Like, I'm going to end the war in Ukraine. How? Right? I'm going to end the war or I'm going to end the conflict in the Middle East. I mean, like, I'm going to deport all these people. I'm going to magically lower inflation even though it's back down to 3%. Like, again, it's okay. It's what you should do as the challenger, to critique the failings of the current administration. And there are openings there, right? As we've discussed, Afghanistan, immigration, like there are openings to hit, but you have to have something behind it. I shouldn't say you have to. You don't have to when you're ahead and you're running against an 81-year-old who has trouble, stringing sentences together. You don't have to. But there comes a time where you may have to. And I'm just shocked that this deep into the campaign at such a critical time, like that speech, there's just almost nothing in the way of actual policy. And maybe that's our new politics. Maybe our new politics is all about personality and, grand pronouncements. But I still think at the end of the day, people still actually care about, I don't know, what a president might do, what laws might be passed, what proposals might be made. And that is where Trump and his campaign, despite, again, I think overall they've run a very good campaign, especially considering who their opponent is. But that's the vulnerability they have left themselves. But you have to be able to take advantage of it. And the other thing that was striking to me too wasn't just the specifics or lack of specifics. It was some of the things that weren't mentioned. When I didn't watch the whole thing over the 4 days, but I was there, for a good bit of it. I didn't hear anybody talk about climate change. We have these record heat waves around the country. In fact, the things I heard were to strip away proposals that might, that are helping us deal with that, right? Like the electric car subsidies and things of that nature.
They're
I heard
calling it
nothing about
the green new
the
scam.
green new scam. I
Yeah.
heard nothing about support for Ukraine, a democratic ally being attacked by an authoritarian country that's trying to take it over. I heard nothing about the talk of the positive benefits of immigration. Like, yeah, you want to crack down on illegal immigration, sure, but talk about the people that have helped drive, like, throughout our history, not just today, drive our economy, push us forward, how immigrants are often some of our best citizens. The crime statistics with immigrants, yes, no crime should be happening with illegal immigrants. They shouldn't be in the country. We agree with that. But the crime statistics with immigrants are lower than native born. Like, there's a way you can talk about it while presenting your side of the story. And on those issues, they didn't even try. And I saw a George W. Bush clip that my friend sent me, and I've seen it going around a little bit on X. And look, George W. Bush has a mixed legacy, to say the least, right? Iraq War, we all know that. But this is a minute-long clip. And I don't know exactly what year it's from, but it seems like it's when he was president. It looks like something shot around that time, and he looks to be about that age. So he left in '09. So that'd be 15 years ago, right? And he's talking to college students. And in a minute, George W. Bush talks about the dangers of isolationism, the dangers of nativism, meaning
Mhm.
anti-immigration sentiment, and the dangers of protectionism when it comes to trade. And he goes through and lists some historical examples.
I
And
saw
he
that.
talks about how in the 1920s, we were isolationists because we thought what was happening in Europe wouldn't affect us and we needed to protect ourselves. America first, right? Was literally what people said. And then what happened? 20 years later, you had World War II. It turns out what happens in the world matters to America. He talked about protectionism and the Smoot-Hawley tariffs and how back in that time and how devastating they were for us. Because what happens when you slap across the board tariffs? You raise prices for everyone on everything. And then what other countries do? They retaliate, which makes it harder for our exporters to do business in other countries. And then he talked about tribal nativism and how throughout American history we've had an ugly period of trying to end immigration because of specific groups coming in, Jews for a while, Catholics. It's happened throughout our history. Now, I'm not saying, look, that's different than a mass problem with illegal immigration, which is a problem, and we need to deal with it. But my point is those, and it's funny. Bush ended it by saying, "I feel like that's coming back." I'm paraphrasing, and man, was he right, because that now is the Republican Party, and that strain of populism. Again, are there critiques of totally free trade? Yes, there's globalization has some negative downsides. We've seen that. There are legitimate critiques there. The way China's exploited the system. There's certainly critiques about illegal immigration. There's critiques about America's role in the world and being too expansionist. We went probably too far in the direction of a George W. Bush in most of those things, right? But now the party has completely gone the other way. Like that pendulum has swung all the way to the other side, like where you can't even see it anymore in the Republican Party. That has allowed an opening now for the Democrats, right? They can say, hey, we don't believe in wars. Biden ended the war in Afghanistan, but we think America has a strong role to play to standing up for our allies, standing up against Vladimir Putin, especially when Trump has picked J.D. Vance as his vice president. Russia loves that, right? Because J.D. Vance has literally called for ending the war in Ukraine at pretty much any cost. Like, let's just get out and look, if we got out, we know what would happen. It would be a deal that would be very favorable in terms of Russia and very unfavorable in terms of Ukraine. And it would be a win for Putin and it would embolden him for the future, right? And that is the modern Republican Party. And so, again, I'm not saying that they're totally wrong on everything. I'm saying because of that swing that George W. Bush clip encapsulated, there's an opening on the other side if you have the right candidate.
Yeah, a couple things. First of all, I do want to say, because I usually watch the second half of most of these nights. I'm putting my kids down for bed. I'm catching the second half of it. So last night, I thought the energy was incredible.
Yeah.
Hulk Hogan, okay, it's still Hulk Hogan's pretty cool. Let's be honest. That
It
was
was
funny.
gimmicky, but it
Yeah, but it
worked.
worked. It worked.
It
You rip
worked.
your shirt off, Hulkamania,
Yep.
Trumpomania, that was cool. Kid Rock, I've always liked Kid Rock. I don't care. I'm not a person that like will eliminate people based on politics in terms of listening to their music and all that. So I thought Kid Rock was cool. Dana White brought energy. But then I think all of the energy in the room left with the last hour. I agree with you on that with Trump's speech, which makes me wonder because I think that the convention was so good overall, but you really did give Democrats the way it ended. You gave Democrats a lot to work with over the weekend to kind of spin it their own way after an amazing convention. I think most people would agree for the first, really, I mean, until the last hour when Trump just started meandering. But I want to bring up one thing because you brought this up, and I think it's very interesting. And I've seen this on social media, I've seen this in comments, and I think it's very, very true. I've heard people, even now we're discussing that Biden's going to step down. I see so many people, these aren't bots, and I see people commenting on our videos and they go, it doesn't matter. Donald Trump is going to win no matter what. And I'm thinking about it, and it's like, I don't agree with that, by the way. If they switch out Biden, I think it's an essential coin flip. Now, it might be 55-45, whatever it is, 52-48. But I think if the Democrats switch out Biden and Harris, I think it's even money personally. But I bring this up because I think this is one of the issues with 2020 is Donald Trump does lie all the time about his leads and what's going on. And I mean, he told the Wayne County canvassers not to certify, and he lost Michigan by 154,000 votes. And he's convinced so many people that he won the 2020 election when he didn't. And I think it's real dangerous because you can understand, by the way, you can understand, and look, I understand Donald Trump was just shot. There are crazy people on every side of the aisle. I think we can all agree on that. But you can understand a January 6th response if you truly believe you've been cheated. And that's what Trump did for 2 months throughout the media. He convinced these people they were cheated. And what I worry about, because I think if they switch out Biden, there is a very good chance that the Democrats win. And when I see that it's over, there's no chance that Trump can lose. And then also, here's another thing: if they switch out Biden, you're going to have a new element of that's cheating, right? That
Oh,
was
of
cheating.
course.
So
Yeah.
that's going to be a narrative also. But like, I do worry if Trump loses to whoever the hell we're talking about, Gretchen Whitmer, Gavin Newsom, Kamala, or Josh Shapiro, whoever, like, I really worry again because Trump just tells these people nonstop, like, not only we're going to win, I get that. That's just being confident, but like, there's no chance we're going to lose. And that's how
Right.
people who aren't very informed, who only watch one-sided news, start to feel like I'm losing my country, I'm being cheated. We have to take up arms potentially.
Yeah. No, you're right. And that's exactly what he did in the lead up to 2020. He actually started before the election. And with this essential, I can't lose. If I lose, it means they cheated. And that's look, I I'm really worried about it. I got less worried about it as it became more and more likely Trump would win, right? And then it's like, well, hey, if he wins, he wins. But I think the thing that really worries me now is if it's close, the RNC has put a ton of money into hiring election lawyers that are all over the country and volunteers watching everything.
Mhm.
And look, slightly weird things happen in elections with delays and whatever. So if that happens, I mean, they're going to be all over it right away. And it is really scary. Now, again, he's the favorite right now. And look, I'm scared about some things that may happen in a second Trump administration if he wins, but I'm also really scared about what may happen if he loses. So either way, I think there are legitimate reasons to be worried. I think we'll be okay. I think America will be all right, but am I 100% convinced? No.
Yeah, and I'm not, by the way, just so everybody knows, I'm not talking about like a civil war or anything like that. I'm just talking about, a January 6th type situation. And then the other thing that I kind of think about is, let's say Trump wins. So let's say Trump wins, and for the most part, everything is kind of chill. Now, I'm sure there'll be some people in the streets on the left that do some things. Hopefully it's nothing crazy, but you never know. But I would worry, just and I've said this 5,000 times, but I still have to say it if we have new viewers or listeners. Like, I don't have that many qualms with what Trump did during his presidency. I think he was a pretty good president. My main issue, my only issue really, is trying to overturn the election in 2020. So what I actually kind of would concern myself with is, let's say Trump wins. Okay, so Trump wins 2024, and that's obviously his last term. Some people say, "Oh, he's going to serve a third term. He's going to never leave." I'm like, "No, I don't worry about that one bit." But what I would worry about is, let's say JD Vance is the candidate, right? And Trump and the Republicans are running the show. And let's say JD Vance loses closely, but there's irregularities, and they do the same thing they did in 2020. And that's a story for 2028. But that's what I would worry about more because, you know, to me, as bad as January 6th was, to me, what was worse was the slow moving coup attempt,
Yes.
I would call it, through, and they'll say, "Oh, these are crazy legal theories." Like, no, I mean, they had a fake electors plot in 7 states, right?
Right.
You told the Wayne County prosecutors, or excuse me, canvassers, not to certify. You lost by 154,000 votes. Everybody knows about Georgia. Find me 11,000 votes. That's what I worry about. Is I don't worry about the Civil War. I don't worry about people
No,
taking up arms. I
I
worry
don't either.
about Also, I worry about a Supreme Court that it sure seems like will do everything that Donald Trump says. That's what I worry about.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, look, we're too fat and happy in America to have a civil war. I really
Right.
don't think that's like we want our mani pedis and our Starbucks delivered to us, and we're look, this isn't the 1860s. But that said, isolated political violence, if something like you just said happens, I totally worry about that. Absolutely. And one of the defenses people have is, well, they were just using the system, right? And it didn't matter. He left, which is true. He did. But the point is they failed. But what if they had succeeded? We would have had a constitutional crisis and we would have had many people in the streets, and who knows what would have happened. The outcome would have been uncertain, and it would have thrown our whole democracy into jeopardy. That's what would have happened had Mike Pence not certified the election, had the congressional Republicans been able to block the certification, had fake electors been seated. Like, that's what we would have had. And you're right to worry about that. And there are other things to worry about too. And look, we've talked about them before, but I know Trump has distanced himself from Project 2025, but there are things in there like firing civil service people, the people that populate our government that aren't political appointees, doctors and scientists and people with PhDs and experts in all kinds of fields and departments, and replacing them with essentially loyalists, right? That's not on the level of what you're talking about, but that's pretty concerning. That's something to legitimately be concerned about. And that is, again, but you have to make that argument. You've got to paint the picture for the American people. And that really can only come from, or primarily come from, the nominee. And that's why the nominee is so important. And you mentioned the vulnerability. When Trump got shot, he jumped up to almost 70% in the prediction markets. Now he's at 61, which I think is fair. So let's say the Democrats pick someone besides Biden and he's like a 60-40 favorite. That's probably fair, but that's not too far from 50-50. And it wouldn't, and the Democrats, you can imagine them if they do it right. And again, I'm not, first of all, we don't even know for sure they're going to do it. I think they will, but we don't know if they're going to do it right and execute it. But if they do, and they at the convention are unified, and they do manage to pull it together and have a good convention, and they're going to have a ton, obviously, of media attention, not just because it's the convention, but because it might be the first contested convention many of us have ever seen in our lifetime. I mean, this hasn't happened since the 1960s. So now you could use that potentially as a springboard, and then it's maybe a jump ball again. I think what Trump has done, to his credit of being more disciplined, and to the credit of, I mentioned his campaign and how professional of an operation it is, and then of course the shooting really cemented this, is he has basically brought into the fold all of the soft Trump people, I'll call them, the people who
Mhm.
leaned Trump, liked him, but were a little bit hesitant, the people like Elon Musk, the people who maybe think it's in their financial interest to be behind the winner or the guy who looks like they're going to win, and we're kind of on the fence. All of those people now, the people who maybe needed a little bit of a push, but were kind of Trump curious, those people now I think are with him. Like, he has cemented that, and that is very formidable, because we know in 2016 and 2020 he was able to get about 47% of the vote. And he's pulling around that number. Like, his floor is now higher than it's probably ever been. And so it's going to be tough to beat him because of that. He has cemented that floor, but he hasn't really increased the ceiling very much, which is why he's only at 60% in the betting odds and not 80%. Even, again, I think it's worth mentioning, he's had a great 3 weeks, and the Democrats have had the worst 3 weeks I've ever seen in a general election campaign. And it's still like, if the Democrats have a decent candidate, it's still a 60-40 race with 3.5 months to go.
Yeah, so I'll throw out a prediction here. If it's Kamala, and I don't want it to be Kamala, but if it's Kamala, I bet you the election betting odds right around election time will be about 55% Trump, 45% Kamala. If it's somebody else like a Whitmer Shapiro, I think the betting odds will be dang close to 50-50. And I think it will be a jump ball. If you look at the polling that all has come out since the assassination attempt, so let's just say it's half assassination attempt and half RNC bump. So the four polls that were all out after the assassination attempt, So we're going Reuters, Morning Consult, Emerson, CBS News. These four are Trump plus 2, Trump plus 4, Trump plus 4, Trump plus 5. If you add those up, that's basically about Trump plus 3.75, the most recent polling. So I think they're gonna switch out Biden. And then the other thing is, okay, so Democrat nomination odds. Harris right now is at 53%, Biden's at 24, Gretchen Whitmer's at 7%. I think the reason this is a jump ball, and I'm honest to God, like if you asked me right now who's going to win the election, because I'm assuming the Democrats are switching out Biden, I wouldn't lean one way or the other. I really wouldn't. I have no idea. I think if you told me, Eric, that Kamala is the nominee, I would probably say I would be willing if you made me bet $10. I would bet on Trump to win against Kamala. If it's somebody else, I think it's dang near 50-50. I would even maybe lean Democrat. And the only thing I say is, and I've said a lot, but like you just keep seeing Dems in disarray. Like, of course the Dems are going to unify. They need to get rid of Biden. And even if everybody doesn't like Kamala or whoever, once it's her, you have like what? I mean, 2.5 months where it's going to be everybody behind her, right? Like
Yeah.
everyone is going to unite. Right now, yes, the Dems are in disarray, but in my opinion, it's a good thing. Like it's a good thing, even though it's crazy, it's chaotic. Like the news cycles are different, man. News cycles only last like 6 hours. Like the second the Democrats say it's Kamala Harris or it's Gretchen Whitmer, like you have a full attack for 2.5 months and everybody's going to be behind that person. And I think it's going to be 50-50 personally.
Well, and at that point, it will come because I agree with you. That's what will happen, assuming they execute this well. Then it comes down to does that candidate, if it's Kamala, execute, right? Is it the Kamala we've seen in the last year, which I think has been pretty good, and I think Republicans really underestimate her, or is it the Kamala we saw in her presidential campaign and early in the administration when she looked in way over her head? We don't know. But you're right about the potential for craziness. Here's the thing: you need craziness if you're the Democrats because you're behind. You have to have something. Assuming Trump, and that's another thing that Trump's evolution as a better politician and his more professional operation have shown you. You can't depend on him to implode. You can't depend on him to maybe make some of the mistakes that he's made in the past. In part because I think he's gotten better, but in part because people now it's kind of baked in. Like we know he's going to say some crazy shit. We know that something come out that will make him look bad. It's already in the cake, right? Unless it's something that is just I can't even imagine what it would be, but I guess maybe you could come up with something that a tape or a video or maybe, but it's hard for me to even imagine what that would be. My point is, Trump's not going to beat himself. He's in a better position than he's ever been because he's brought all those leaner Trumps to the fold. It's going to be really tough to beat him. But if you shake it up enough and you get unified, it can happen. And I mentioned it earlier. I mentioned it Tuesday, that internal Democratic analysis of 15,000 voters in 7 swing states and how Gretchen Whitmer, Josh Shapiro, Wes Moore, and Mark Kelly, those 4 ran 5 points ahead of Biden in the swing states, which in many cases is enough to make the difference between winning those states and losing. Now, those 4 have much lower name recognition for Biden than Biden does. They've never been tested on a national stage. So I'm not saying it's like automatic you put them in and that would be the margin, but I'm saying it gives you the upside. A Democratic polling firm, PPP, did this polling in Pennsylvania that came out this week. Okay. Pennsylvania may be the key state that if it's close could determine it. Trump leads Biden by 4. Trump leads Harris by 2. So a difference there, not insignificant. Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, runs 4 points ahead of Trump in a state where he is well known and does have name recognition that's basically universal. He was literally on the ballot in 2022 as the governor, right? So that's not a thing. That poll's not one where you could point to and say, oh, well, they're just saying that because they don't really know enough about Josh Shapiro. But they do in Pennsylvania, and he's beating Biden by 4. And if he could do that in Michigan and Wisconsin as well, and that's why I say I think it probably will be Kamala. I think that is the most likely scenario. It's what the betting odds say overwhelmingly. But Shapiro, Whitmer, assuming they could earn it in some order, if you just want to win, I think I still, at the very least, one of them should be the VP.
Mhm.
One of them should be the VP if Harris is the president, because that gives you the best chance to win. We need Whitmer or Shapiro on the ticket for the Democrats in one way or another, at least one of them.
All right, let me give you a weird analogy. I just thought of it. But you were talking about national name recognition. And this is where I think our news cycles and social media cycles are so different now than back in the day. And when you said that, for whatever reason, the person that came to mind was the Hawk Tuah girl. All right? Hawk Tuah. I mean, Eric,
Wait, you're saying
within
Hawk Tua 2024?
Hawk Tuah 2024, spit on that thing. This girl, Eric, within, I'm talking not even 24 hours. I mean, within one, if you got home from work, everyone on earth was talking about Hawk Tuah girl. Nobody had ever heard of this person. Within 2 days, every celebrity had commented. People are doing their own videos, right? Every single comedian is doing a bit on it. Like within 48 hours, Hawk Tuah Girl, you could probably make the case that for that 48-hour span, Hawk Tuah Girl was the most famous person in the United States of America, if not Earth. I mean, really, like that's how
Yeah.
crazy social media is. The reason I bring that up is somebody like Josh Shapiro, who, let's be honest, nobody really knows him. I mean, you're from Pennsylvania. Pennsylvanians know him. Gretchen Whitmer, by the way, I think she was my representative and senator for a second when I lived in Lansing back in, I got to check that. I know she was both. I don't remember when she actually switched.
At the state level, state
At the state
representation.
level, this was back in 2000, like 6, 7. So nobody knows Gretchen Whitmer. Her only national profile is that she got fake kidnapped, whatever it was. That's the only thing most people know about her. The reason I brought up Hawk Tuah Girl, I was not trying to make any type of comparison to Josh Shapiro or Gretchen Whitmer. All I'm saying is, Eric, all it takes nowadays is if Whitmer or Shapiro took 1 or 2 weeks and did every big show, every
Yes.
big podcast for 14 straight days, immediately they can either prove themselves or not. Like they might get exposed, by the way, but if they're good, they can immediately just own everything with the way
Yeah.
media is these days.
I had a friend, somebody text me that Trump person that was basically like on Saturday, well, this is over now. There's no chance. There's no chance. And I'm just thinking, no, because the news cycle moves so fast. A and
Mhm.
B, Biden's likely to be tossed out. So that makes it a completely new ball game. And I think they have, look, the Trump campaign has ran, as I said, a really good campaign against Biden. Everything is geared to Biden. Because of course it is. You're running against the incumbent president. That's not a criticism. They have executed that plan extremely well. And obviously, Biden has helped them. I mean, right. He's played right into the stereotype they spent months building up. And so it's the strength versus weakness. It's the frailty. All of that stuff is tied up to a large degree in the person of Biden. If that person is replaced, and again, the big caveat, I'll say it over again because we're saying if the new person performs well, because obviously if they don't, then it's over anyway. But if they do perform well and they do all these interviews and they have a really strong debate against Trump, assuming that debate goes forward in early September, you are in a new world. The Trump campaign is not, they are, if you notice the Trump campaign since the debate, they have been very muted in their criticisms of Biden.
Mhm.
Trump just basically shut up for a week and a half. They didn't do what many people would do. Like if you were behind going into that debate, if Trump were down 5 or 10 points and Biden had that debate performance, it would have been everywhere. They would have been running ads constantly. They would have been all over it. They didn't do that. Why? Because they want Biden to stay in the race. It's the same reason they're making the argument now that you mentioned earlier that this is a coup. That's what they're saying. That if the Democrats get that if Joe Biden decides he can't win or he's too old or he just doesn't want it anymore, that's somehow the equivalent of a coup. Of course, that's ludicrous, right? It's his decision. Now, is there pressure on him? Absolutely. That's what a smart party does. They pressure the candidate to give themselves the best chance to win. He's not the official nominee of the party. That's decided at the convention. And if he chooses to not be the nominee, that isn't even in the same galaxy as a coup. It's a ludicrous argument. It's a it's what I said a few weeks ago. I said a few weeks ago, I'm not a Republican or a Democrat. But I'm willing to lend my support temporarily to either one. And the Republican Party to me is so far gone in the Trump era. And the Democratic Party, even though I have my disagreements, particularly with some of the people on the far left, I was in 2020. I was like, you know what? This is a smart professional party. They saw Biden's this guy
Mhm.
that isn't perfect, but he's our best chance. We think he can win. We're with him. Let's get it done. And I'm like, you know what? I respect that. I respect this party coming together from the elites like Barack Obama, Nancy Pelosi, all the way down to the rank and file. And they're like, this is our guy. We're in it to win it. Let's do it. And it worked. And then they got a lot, he got a lot done in his first 3 years, whether you agree or disagree. And now you're in a similar situation, but it's reversed. It's the mirror image. It's okay, now he's not the guy. It's clear as day from the elites all the way down to the rank and file. And I know he and his people have tried to spin it as, well, this is the elites. No, look at the polling. It's 2/3 of Democrats, 50% to
Mhm.
2/3 who say we need a different nominee. Like they say he's too old. He can't do it. This is the entire party for the most part. There are still some people with him, many in the African American community, some progressives like AOC, Bernie Sanders are still with him. But even they, no. Their argument is basically, well, it's too dangerous to switch out right now. It's not we think Biden's great. It's well, the alternatives are too scary. So my point is the party now is making another decision. And a few weeks ago, I was really concerned because I'm like, man, I knew the Republicans were kind of gone, but now the Democrats are gone too because they're doing the same thing. They're getting behind their guy no matter what, even if it defies what we're all seeing, even if they have to like lie or just not say anything, trying to defend the indefensible. That's what they were doing. They were
Mhm.
publicly trying to defend the indefensible. Privately, they were saying something different, but publicly, they were defending the indefensible. Now, it looks like, and I say looks like because this isn't done yet, it looks like and you saw it this week, the dam really broke 2 days ago when Adam Schiff, highest ranking Democrat, highest profile Democrat so far, current rep, Senate, next senator here in California, came out and said he thinks Biden should step aside. He wouldn't have done that without Pelosi probably
Mhm.
endorsing it because he and Pelosi are extremely close. And then you got the leaks that Pelosi had told him that he couldn't win. Schumer had told him he couldn't win. Jeffries had told him he couldn't win. That was not a coincidence. So that is, and people look at that, who criticize it and say, well, this is a coup behind the scenes. No, that's what responsible elected officials should be doing. They should be putting their party in the best position to win. So my faith in the Democrats, again, even though I'm not a Democrat myself, and I certainly disagree with it, my faith in them as like rational political actors is rising. But I just saw this on the betting odds, Charlie. Yesterday, Kamala had gotten up to like 25%, and Biden at his low was down around 5.
Mhm.
Now, Kamala's down to 19 and Biden's at 9. That's according to electionbettingodds.com. So again, Kamala is still favored, but in the last day, because you see now today, some of the Biden campaign people they're releasing statements saying we're still in it, we're more committed than ever. I don't buy it. I don't believe that. I mean, I believe they may believe that today, but I don't believe that's where we will end up. But this is the time you have to push. Like they would be derelict in their responsibilities. They'd be dishonest. They'd be doing a country that a disservice if they didn't do everything they could. If anybody is in that position, that is what you should be doing. If anything, they're cowardly to not speak out publicly.
Yeah, and I wanna end, my part on this. I don't think this was a master plan by the Democrats, and I'll tell you why. First of all, if you go back, not just 2016, if you go back to 2020 and watch Joe Biden in the debates and interviews, he is a different person. He has aged so much over the last 4 years, especially the last 2. And I think what happened was that Joe Biden probably did think at first he was a bridge candidate. But then when there was supposed to be a red wave, Democrats did so much better than anticipated. They go,
Yeah.
hey, maybe we can run this guy. And I think what happened, Eric, was the deterioration and decline of Joe Biden was so quick over the last, whatever you want to call it, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, whatever it is. It has been so rapid And at that point, they're probably already thinking after 2022, okay, we'll run him. And then he just starts to decline so fast. And
Yeah.
I truly believe, I don't think this was a master plan, because I don't think if Joe Biden had that horrific debate, I still think they tried to push him through. I think everything changed at the debate. Now you can make the argument, did they know at that time if they do the debate early, okay, then they can switch him out. I'm totally up on that conspiracy theory. But I think if you dial it back 2 years, I think, man, we did good. I'm saying we as a Democrat, the party thinking, dang, we did really good in 2022. Let's run this guy. But then Joe Biden, from a mental acuity, just fell off a cliff.
Yeah, regardless of what Biden decides, especially if he stays in and loses, but even if he doesn't, there's going to be books written about this, probably starting next year, like there and for years and years to come. So there's going to be a lot to unpack about this, as they say, and we'll see. But my theory, and hell, this is our podcast, so I'm just going to tell you like I think it's pretty clear. If you see the videos on X after the debate, where they will have in the same post Joe Biden giving an answer at the one of the 2020 debates, and then him giving an answer at 2024. And for anybody who says, "Oh, he was like this in 2020," I mean,
No.
you are delusional. Like,
Mhm.
you can watch those clips again, and it's night and I saw a clip the other day from an interview he did in 2021, or it may have been early 2022, and he was on it. I mean, didn't he looked sharp? He was right there with the arguments about taxes. He turned the question on its head. It pivoted quickly. And again, that was one interview, but that was like 3 years ago. So
Mhm.
what we all know this because we've all had aging relatives. What happens with aging oftentimes is it's a little bit at a time and then all at once.
Yeah.
And that often happens, and it often happens when people hit their late 70s and early 80s. They gradually deteriorate to the point where it's not even that noticeable, and then all of a sudden, a quicker deterioration happens. I think that is clearly what has happened with Biden. I don't know when that quick deteriorate, and I think, but you're right, it's not just that. What also happened is the 2022 midterms went really well, better than Democrats could have expected. He got more legislation passed than probably he expected and his administration expected. He was incredibly effective in those first 2 years with the Democratic Congress of getting big, lasting pieces of legislation passed. So you're doing well at getting things across the finish line. You do well in the midterms. Your clear heir apparent Kamala is consistently polling worse than you are, than Biden is, had lower favorability ratings, and you feel like you're mentally still in a pretty good place. And then what happened is he started to deteriorate. His advisors stopped making him available, limited it severely. He didn't do the Super Bowl interview. I remember that. And at
Mhm.
that point, you're like into the primaries.
Yeah.
You're thinking, let's just ride this through. Let's ride this through to election day. Again, I'm not trying to justify that because in hindsight, the clear thing to do would have been him late in 2023 to say, I'm not running again. We're going to have an open competition, and maybe it's Kamala, maybe it's somebody else. In hindsight, obviously that's the thing to do. But if you piece it together, you can understand why we ended up in the situation we ended up in. And I said all along, the Democrats never had a great option, but I always thought their best option was see if Biden has it.
Mhm.
Let him try to run as the incumbent. But if it isn't there, use the escape hatch you have. It's totally fine. I mean, we had LBJ did it not that long ago. It was a little bit earlier in the cycle, but in 1968, he was unpopular, an unpopular war. He's like, I'm not running. I'm not going to
Mhm.
run. We're going to decide it at the convention. And that's what they did. Now, they lost that election. It's important to remember. But it's
But hold
not like
on.
it's
But
unprecedented in history.
Bobby Kennedy gets killed also.
Yes. If Bobby Kennedy had not been killed on the night he won the California primary, I think there's a very good chance he would have been the nominee in 1968, and at least a decent chance that he would have, beaten Nixon. Who knows? You're right. The Kennedy assassination intervened. But there's nothing wrong. In fact, not only is there nothing wrong, it's absolutely the right thing to do for Biden, for his legacy, for the party, for the country, for him to step aside and for a new person to come. And look, if he does it this weekend, I know it'll probably be Kamala, but you got 3 weeks. You could have town halls, you could have
Mhm.
debates, and there's no reason you have to come to the convention Monday with the Monday of the convention with it settled.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you have to have it settled by, say, Tuesday, because you would want the ticket picked and you would want everybody to come together. But you don't have to show up there with everything settled. Could you imagine the coverage? I mean, it would be 24/7 blanket coverage. Let the delegates vote, put it on the floor, the energy, the excitement, have multiple votes. I mean, look, I'm not saying that they're going to pick Abraham Lincoln, but Abraham Lincoln if you read that election about the election 1860, he was picked on like the 15th vote. I mean, he was not the leading candidate in the early stages. It was Seward, but eventually they figured it out. They rallied behind him. Parties have done this in American history. It's just in our modern times we're so used to the primary system, but that's how most of American history we did this. We can do it again, like it, and it would be exciting as hell, just from a purely entertainment, standpoint.
Love it. Let's end on that. Everybody settle down. Please comment, like, subscribe, share the video, share the channel, share the shows, put it in your group text, put it on social media. Let's get this thing going. We'll be back next week. It's going to be crazy. We'll see what happens with Biden. Eric, see you, buddy.